Hi everyone, I'm Zoreen here from Esports Network. I've got with me today James Bardolph. Thank you so much for joining me today, James.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you calling from at the moment?
For once, I'm actually in London. I'm actually at home where I live, which I don't often get to be here. I
Oh, I see.
actually vacuumed the place yesterday
Oh,
with a
nice.
Dyson, right? And it doesn't look like there's much on the floor. But all the accumulation of dust while I've been away, things just full of like I don't even know what. So yeah.
Oh, goodness. Wow. Well, I can only imagine. I mean, that's just the nature of the esports beast, isn't it? All the travel and all the time away from home. I mean, that's actually a good segue into what I want to ask about. Like how do you deal with all that? I mean, it's part of your job, right, to be away from home. Like, how often do you actually get to be at home?
Yeah, I am not in the country. Well, I'm in the US for about half the year, and I may end up in other
Mm,
countries as well. Um, I think it depends on how heavy your schedule is, for one. It depends on what makes you happy, for two. Some people struggle to deal with it. Some people want to be at home. I like to be at home, but I quite enjoy being away. I like being far away for a while because I try to use those places as hubs to visit places I've never been to before, and that I love traveling, so it works really well for me. Ironically, Dan's not a big fan of traveling, so if we're like hopping all over the place, then I'm loving it. He isn't, but if he's got like 2 months in LA, he can go to Muscle Beach and do fitness stuff. So
hmm
it depends on what you can find that you enjoy in those places. So I love doing it. Sometimes I miss London. Like in my last trip, I was very much looking forward to being back in London um, because I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn to sail while I was in LA, but our schedule didn't allow for that, unfortunately. So I didn't get to do what I wanted to do, but normally I do get to go places like Fiji, Mexico, go diving. So it's pretty awesome for me.
hmm When when you're choosing like a place to host ECS or the finals, does that play a role into it? Are you like, oh, I like to see, I don't, Mexico, like let's host the finals there.
My input this season was that I thought we should do something different for the players. I kind of got the idea for it from watching World Poker Tour
Mm.
because they did one season in Aruba and the intro had like Shanghai come up on a jet ski and like, welcome to World Poker Tour. And I thought this is really awesome. We could do something like this for our finals, and it would be nice to have like the first season of the year. We're in London, we're doing it big, and the second season we could, for example, do something different or different location each year. Have like something directed for the players, so they're in an all-inclusive resort. There's a foam party. You can even, if you really want to, play musical instruments for the foam party. So it's something very different. It's a nice way to close out the year for everybody involved, the talent, the production, the players, and I
hmm
think everyone's very much looking forward to going there. So I didn't pick Cancun itself. I mean, I think there's a number of places, mostly I think Caribbean, around the Caribbean, the islands there most suitable for this kind of thing. But we have a team who like, they had a hard job of going out to look at these locations, see if they were any good, and so on and so forth. Try out the phone party, maybe even. So it's a team effort, definitely.
hmm
But my role is these days, or title at least, is creative director. So that's my input to kind of get this kind of thing going.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you have talked a little bit about your role at FaceIt Media in the past as creative director, but how, like, can you tell us more about like how you do your job? What does your day to day actually look like?
Um, it very much depends. I don't really have an average day. Obviously, if we're in season, then the day to day is on camera. Off camera,
Mm.
it depends what projects we have. If it's a Counter Strike related project, I have a lot of input. If it's a different game, I may have less input, or I'll just be on the outskirts. It really varies. But so, for example, my if we take ECS, my input will be the design of the studio, the style of the studio, the content we put out. So like the Sands of CS:GO series, for example, um, testing out an AWP, that kind of thing is where my input comes to fruition. I have lots of crazy ideas as well, which are like way beyond the budget. But when we start to go down to reasonable things, then we can execute those. So fun things like that, and just working in conjunction with other teams. Everything talent related. I'll manage the hiring of talent, the who we hire for the Counter-Strike shows. Sorry, my asthma's terrible at the moment. So I think that's probably most of the nuts and bolts. I get involved. I'm one of the guys who goes between media and platform as well. Obviously, I'm a big user of the thing as well, so I try and help them on a small scale. I guess I'm a good source of feedback, but I'll try to do the adverts as well. Like we had the parody infomercial, which I can't take the credit for, but obviously was a part of. So those are a lot of the things that I do under that title.
And so what's the organization structure like? Obviously, you've got the platform side and the media side. Do they kind of like work independently of each other, or is there a lot of crossover?
There's crossover with certain people. It doesn't necessarily need to be with everyone, but they are hand in hand to certain degrees. So obviously, for example, ECS runs on FaceIt and so on, and actually some other events do as well, which are not FaceIt. So that's probably more directly platform, but media may have some involvement or have connections. So there's a crossover with some people, but in terms of structure, like the media structure is fairly flat. It's sort of like your normal company, so everybody works together, and we try to harness everyone's individual talents depending on what the current project requires. So people can be fairly flexible, which is good because it allows you to have freedom to do more than you might in a more rigid structure.
Now, I've seen both you and DDK have talked about in the past that you are open to cast other tournaments as well. You're not just exclusive to FaceIt. So long as these other tournaments, and I quote, do not interfere with FaceIt obligations. What does that actually mean?
Well, that's really more for, I mean, we said that more for people like the fans, because the companies know this. But for example, some people might say, oh, like, why don't we see James and Dan at more tournaments? And for example, Epicenter asked us to do their event, but we couldn't do it because it clashed with some days of ECS. So otherwise we would have been there. Some events like DreamHack, for example, don't ask us to do them, or they might on a rare occasion, but we're not top of their list. So I think people will make assumptions like, oh, they don't do other events because they work for FaceIt, but we're just clarifying that that's not the case. We can, as long as we're free, we can more or less do whatever we want, as long as it's not something which is in direct competition. Like you won't see us doing Pro League, for example, because that just wouldn't make any sense. But pretty much anything outside of that, we can do. If people want us to do them, we did Beyond the Summit this year. Obviously, we do E-League every season as well. So it's just a FYI really for the people who think that there is some kind of restriction, or there's no reason for people to not hire us if they want to, basically. So we're just letting people know that is what the status quo is.
So when you're casting tournaments as well, like, do you still like oversee and have a hand in the logistics of everything? Like, how much influence do you have there?
No, other people will take care of logistics. So, I mean, my logistics will go as far as moving talent around. There's obviously, like Mexico, for example, you have quite complicated logistics in getting hardware in, like all the computers, things like that. But there's a lot of things that I don't have the physical time to do, because when we're in season, we're doing like 8 to 10 hours a day, and that's like 2 months, and that's 4 months of the year. So it's not reasonable for me to really have a hand in that, because I would just slow everything down, because it's like a computer. It's as fast as the slowest component. So you don't want to put in slow components if you don't need to. So
I don't need to be so modest. Right. I mean, because I did, obviously the groups for the Mexico event are something that have been quite interesting. I know it was a random draw, but when you saw them, what was like your reaction to how it turned out?
Well, it looks like a bloodbath on paper, and maybe it will be. So I can't wait to see it. I mean, on paper it does look lopsided, but maybe we'll see interesting things when we get to the best of three segment. So I'm looking forward to what's going to happen. I think we're going to see great clashes either way. I think Optic versus Mouse Sports is going to be competitive. Fnatic versus Luminosity will be very interesting because of the lack of familiarity. They're from two very different regions. And I don't know if Fnatic have played Luminosity. Maybe they did in the recent days this week at LAN, but beyond that, I think those teams will be very unfamiliar with each other, and that could make fireworks. So I think people might look at name value a lot and won't really look beyond that, but I think it's going to be great.
Oh, well, I'm also looking forward to it. Have you been involved in the pitch process for majors before?
I have been, yes. I am not one of the most hands-on people in the sense that obviously I have the things I have to do are very time-consuming, as I mentioned before. But if we pitch for a major, then pretty much everybody working on Counter-Strike will be involved.
Right. Is it like a case of like you walk into a room and Gabe Newell sitting there with like Jesse Cliff, and you're like, all right, this is what we're going to do for this major. Like, what's that like?
I think that people send them pitches or presentations. At that end, I think people might fly over there. I'm not involved in that part of the process because I'm normally doing something else or I'm somewhere else. But so I don't really know 100%. But I think there are direct conversations, but definitely not with Gabe. I mean, I think he once mentioned that his schedule doesn't allow him, or has not allowed him, to turn up at CS events in the past. I wouldn't believe that, though. If Gabe Newell wants to turn up to a CS event, he'll turn up to a CS event.
Right, and of course.
I think he chooses not to for whatever reason, and that's fine. I don't need to see him there in particular. I think people would find it nice, but I don't know what they would expect him to do, like dance or something. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, people make presentations, they send pitches, and I guess they will try to, if they can have a direct conversation about them or talk them through it, then they will, because why not?
Yeah. It's just something that I've always been very curious about, and because it's so competitive, right? I thought also you'd be able to offer some great input. What are your thoughts on ESL standardizing its tournament format?
I see that they are doing 6-day events. I mean, that's going to create a lot more hours, which means a lot more screen time for their sponsors and so on. So that's pretty cool. In terms of standardizing, I don't think it matters too much either way. I think they listed 3 brands which will all standardize. I mean, you can choose to standardize all of them. We can choose to make the 3 brands different, and there's merit for both of them. So it doesn't really matter which you choose to do, but there's not always anything wrong with standardizing between. But I mean, what they've standardized is loads of days, basically, which means loads of hours, which means selling lots of content. So if that's the direction they want to take to increase their revenues, then that's cool for them. I think it probably makes it harder for I mean, it's already been difficult enough for companies who aren't under that ASL DreamHack umbrella to have a space in Counter-Strike, something I think Silverview has mentioned for PGL before. And I think that this makes it even more difficult for other companies to find a space. So in one way, it's it benefits them in 2 ways, right? They get more hours and they make it harder for other people in the space to find event time, basically. So for them, I suppose they will see it as a win-win.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, actually. I didn't really think about it that way. It's almost like a power move, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can translate it in a few different ways. I'm sure they wouldn't say it is, but it has its benefits, right? Because you're just taking out, I mean, that's probably, I guess that 6 days doesn't include travel time as well. So that's a fair chunk of the calendar just taken out by ESL, and that's before the DreamHack bros come in with all of their Counter-Strike. So yeah, definitely benefits them.
Yeah. Is it something that FaceIt will be looking to, I guess, respond with, like a format of their own or something? Or was there like a reaction at all amongst your team?
Not particularly. I mean, we don't really necessarily do the same type of events that they do, so it doesn't really I mean, knee-jerk reactions are not a fan of, so it is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Looking back on the year, is there anything that you wish that you'd done differently?
That's a good question. You could say our director of broadcast, Mike, he painted a map of the world on our studio last season, and it's a terrible map, which I find amusing. There's a bunch of countries missing from it. I do it differently. No, I prefer it as a broken map than one that actually accurately represents the world. And it took a number of weeks for people to notice, like, hey, there's no Denmark on this map. So then the production put a little flag of Denmark where the country should actually be. So that kind of thing was fun. So that's a tough question to answer. I wish we had done more content this year. I wish we'd done more Sounds of CSGO. At first, I didn't really want to do the pistols of the game. But now I think there isn't really anything wrong with doing that. So next year I'm going to be looking to do some more Sounds of CS:GO. I think the last one we did was the AWP, which was a great high for this year. But I think it's time to do more of the weapons now.
Okay. So more content, huh? Does that mean FaceIt Media will become like? Is that your plan for it to become like I guess a network of content?
Well, I think anybody putting out media on our scale should be doing prepared content. Otherwise, you're probably not doing a job properly. So it's just part of what we need to be doing. But the good thing is that in doing that, we are like Dan and I, learning about the things relative to the game, but also it's just a passion. We enjoy doing it. It's fun. So, and we're very lucky to be in that position. But I think it's important. I remember at the Anaheim finals, we had a lot of content that people hadn't seen. I mean, they're always played during our broadcasts, but at the time, a lot of people there hadn't necessarily seen those. So instead of between maps just having like a rotating screen, a schedule or so on, we're just putting James versus Dan content, Sounds of CSGO content. And people loved it. They really enjoyed it. It was really engaging. And I think that's important to have. So it's definitely something we're going to continue with next year.
Now, you touched a little bit upon this before when you mentioned ESL taking up more calendar space, and that's before DreamHack comes in with all their events as well. Now we've also got Refresh putting together the Blast Pro series. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think about more competitors coming into the event space?
I think some people say that Counter-Strike is oversaturated, but I don't really think that is the correct way to look at things. And I think Sponge, I think it was him who said things similar to what I'm about to say, is that because there are loads of events, doesn't mean it's oversaturated. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. It's like you want a less healthier scene with less opportunity for less players. With the abundance of tournaments that we've seen an abundance of teams in North America, for example. You could even argue that there are more teams than there are more organizations than there are teams of an equivalent level to pick up, which has put them in a situation where pretty much it's like contract wars. Everybody's under contract now, and some people are just looking to make a quick buck. But what that has impacted is it has stopped the necessary recycling of common names that you always see. I think it's very easy in a scene to just pick up the same old players and have the same old problems in teams and ignore new talent, accuse them of hacking, or just ignore them. You don't know who they are, so you don't respect them, and so on and so forth. But with all the opportunity that there is in Counter-Strike, along with things like FPL, which help nurture new talent, I think Rops is a great example. He was noticed from FPL, 17-year-old, now plays full-time for Mousesports. part of that is because of all the opportunities and the requirement for so many players, which allows young talent to come in. We see young talent in Ninjas in Pajamas as well. Two of their players, some of the old NIP players moving on. Like you've got Freiburg over at Optic now. So more tournaments means more opportunity. Now, if you think you're seeing the same teams play too many LANs every other week and not getting enough downtime, then it's up to them to play less tournaments. Essentially, that is where you change things. Like I remember there was a team, I saw an interview with them on HLTV, and they said we're playing too many tournaments, and then the next week there was an announcement for a tournament, and of course, hey ho, their name was announced as well. So it's like, if you're playing too many tournaments, you don't get enough time, then why do you keep signing up to every single tournament? Like that's where you change things. You don't have less opportunity in the space, in the ecosystem, just so you see certain teams less. They just need to not go to certain tournaments or raise the level of tournaments that they do attend. It doesn't make sense to reduce opportunity, because if you have less tournaments, then that's less opportunity for people to make money, and less opportunity for teams to have visibility, less opportunity for them to pay people salaries. So you get less Counter-Strike, you get less new players coming through. It makes no sense to look at it that way and say it's oversaturated. You could say maybe teams are oversubscribed, but definitely, I don't know if you can have an oversaturated scene in the way that people are looking at it.
Yeah, I think overall, like that sort of thing benefits the audience more than anyone else. And it forces event organizers to have to step up their game to compete, to get certain teams to come and attend their event and all that. So yeah, I think that's a very good point that you raise. It only benefits like the community and the audience in the end. So yeah. So going forward, FaceIt is coming to the end of the year. We're going to see ECS Season 4 finals. That's really exciting. What other changes can we expect or look forward to next year? Is there anything that you could share?
Well, that depends. Again, we're a bigger team now, so I won't have my eyes on everything. But as far as I'm concerned, it's content. So we're planning to film some content in February for the upcoming season. In terms of changes, our studio tends to change every season. And one thing, I like the casual environment of our studios, but I almost felt like we should be at a breakfast bar in a kitchen. I have like this vision of our studio being a breakfast bar at a kitchen, sitting on stools with elbows on tables, and maybe even it being a real kitchen where people are just walking in and doing whatever. A little bit like Beyond the Summit in that respect. That's like, I feel like that would be really fun, but I don't know if it's something I'll necessarily execute. We could actually do that in our current studio, but I don't know. I might also, because we have this like kitchen area, and we've got this big bar thing in the middle. And I'm tempted to do a cooking show there as well.
Oh my God.
So I just want to do some wild stuff. I had an idea of like having, I don't want to say too much, because if you put ideas out there before you execute them, and then it just inspires other people, which in a competitive environment, you don't want to do that necessarily, but I wanted to do like a cooking show with local guests. So I get nothing in and do a cooking show with him, make some, I don't know, some dumplings or something silly. So we actually, one thing which hasn't surfaced that we did a long time ago, I think season 1 of ECS, is we wanted to do a Bob Ross segment. So we'd have a guest analyst in, or a guest whoever, every week. And basically we would give them a CRT TV with a Bob Ross show, and they'd have to copy along. We'd give them an easel, painting, canvas, all that stuff, and they'd have to copy what he was doing. And we did one with Sadakist, actually. And as a pilot, it wasn't pretty, the recording. The painting was pretty good, actually. I think he's had some training before, but that was one thing we wanted to do, but never really got around to it for whatever reason, probably laziness from me. But we recorded that, but someone who will go unnamed in production messed up the recording, so it had no sound.
Oh no!
Really annoying. It was really fun, but we do have the painting that he made in our office. So I think maybe we'll bring it to the studio next season. But
Oh, that's a shame.
yeah, but we have all these kind of things going on all the time, or at least the ideas, many different ideas like that. So that kind of thing, just more fun, more personality. I think we try to inject as much personality without being cringe or too cringe as we can. So hopefully more of that next year.
Yeah, yeah. You should take that video and then get him to do like a funny dub over it, just like a complete piss take, and make it like really poor and out of sync, but it would be great. I think that sort of content is fantastic and just what the CS scene needs.
We could do that. Yeah, I'll see if I can dig up the video.
There's a free idea for you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up our time today. Thank you so much, James. Really appreciate it. And best of luck with all the new plans and things that you have going forward.
Thank you very much.